I would put perhaps a conservative auction estimate of $80,000 to $120,000.
Oh my, really? And it's under my bed all the time?
Welcome to Antique Treasure BBC. Today, we're uncovering the Chinese imperial vases that produce some of the most astonishing appraisals in Antiques Roadshow history. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell for more hidden wealth, remarkable history, and unbelievable discoveries.
What is so incredibly rare about this is that this piece is a piece of Imperial Chinese porcelain. It's made for the Imperial Court, or pretty close to it.
It's amazing.
I got this at an auction about 15 years ago. I did pay in the range of $350 for it. I collected Tiffany, and I never ran across a pottery. Mainly it was either Tiffany silver.
Number 25. Tiffany Pottery Vase. At first glance, this vase seemed to have everything a Tiffany piece should. The base carried the LCT mark, the word FIGURAL, and enough convincing details to fool many collectors. But the appraiser wasn't focused on the signature. He focused on the style. And within minutes, the first warning signs began to appear.
What I look for in a piece is, stylistically, is it what the maker was known for? And there are things about this piece that are typical of some of Tiffany's work, but there are things about it that aren't typical of all of Tiffany's work. For example, Tiffany was an Art Nouveau guy, and this modeled floral design, this is more French Victorian than American Art Nouveau.
The vase certainly echoed parts of Tiffany's work, especially the flambe glaze inside. But the closer he looked, the more things stopped making sense. Then he turned the vase over. The foot ring revealed the truth.
And then the main thing for me is the clay itself. If we see in the foot ring, the clay is brown, and Tiffany clay was white. Also, the mark is always incised. I've never seen an LCT painted on the bottom of the piece. It's always
Indented.
It's cut into the piece.
Okay.
The clay was brown. Authentic Tiffany pottery used white clay. Even the LCT mark had been painted on instead of being incised into the wet clay as Tiffany always did. These were no longer small inconsistencies. They were clear signs that this vase had been created from the beginning as a fake Tiffany piece.
That somebody scratched a mark into. This one's unusual because I think somebody made this from scratch and made a Tiffany fake piece from scratch.
Then came the valuation. If this had been a genuine Tiffany vase, it could have been worth several $1,000s. But after everything the appraiser had uncovered, the story took a completely different turn.
If somebody believed it was really Tiffany today, this would be a $2,000 or $3,000 piece of pottery. Purely for decorative value, perhaps it's worth $25. I don't think it really has retail value because of the mark on the bottom.
A vase purchased for $350 in the hope that it was a rare Tiffany masterpiece was ultimately valued at little more than $25 as a decorative object. It's a disappointing ending, but the perfect way to begin today's countdown. Because on Antiques Roadshow, not every discovery makes an object more valuable. Sometimes the biggest revelation is learning that it was never what everyone believed it to be. Number 24. French pottery from SHIPWRECK. If the Tiffany pottery vase was the story of a famous name that turned out not to be genuine, this next item proves that sometimes an artifact's greatest value has nothing to do with the object itself. These pieces of pottery aren't perfect, but behind them lies a real-life adventure involving a shipwreck, the Caribbean Sea, and the legendary Jacques Cousteau.
These were a thank you gift from Remy de Heinen, who was mayor of Saint Barthélemy in the French West Indies. He was a pilot, and he oftentimes would fly from island to island trying to spot sunken vessels. He saw one, so he called his friend Jacques Cousteau.
That story alone makes this appraisal unforgettable. Remy de Heinen spotted the remains of a shipwreck from the air, then contacted his friend Jacques Cousteau. After the dive, these pottery fragments were recovered from the seabed where they had rested for centuries. That's the kind of provenance very few artifacts can ever claim.
They came up with this amongst a lot of other things, and these aren't the prettiest of the collection, but very memorable and certainly a treasure to me.
I grew up watching and admiring Jacques Cousteau and his adventures at sea.
For appraisers, shipwreck artifacts offer one remarkable advantage. The date of the shipwreck often provides a reliable timeline for everything recovered from it. But earthenware comes with one major drawback. After spending centuries underwater, much of its original beauty simply doesn't survive.
And this beaker cup is of a type made in Europe after a Chinese original. These are made of earthenware, and earthenware is porous, and it doesn't do well if you put it underwater for a couple of 100 years.
That single word, exciting, captures this entire story. Not because of money, but because of the journey these objects have taken. From the ocean floor to the hands of someone preserving them as part of history. And finally, it was time for Antiques Roadshow to answer the question everyone was waiting for. What were they actually worth?
The value is in the story that you told, which is a great story. The 4 pieces we see here in a good antique shop would perhaps be $100 to $150.
Number 23, Children's Porcelain, Automobile, China. After a story that began on the ocean floor, number 23 brings us back to something much more familiar, a small children's porcelain set that could easily have been found in countless family homes at the beginning of the 20th century.
My father-in-law, he was born in the 1890s. I'm not certain exactly when or where, but they were his as a child, and he always talked about them, and then he passed away, and they came to me.
Like many Antiques Roadshow stories, this one begins with a family heirloom passed down through generations. The appraiser's real question, however, wasn't who had owned the porcelain first, but whether this seemingly ordinary children's set possessed anything that could separate it from the countless mass-produced souvenirs of the early 20th century.
They're German porcelain, and they were made for children as gifts. Most of these were very inexpensive when they were new. Now, if these were just plain white, which some of them are, they would literally be worth $1 or be a kind of garage sale item.
Right.
If they had flowers on them, they might be perhaps $5 for the 2.
At first, the outlook was fairly modest. Children's porcelain like this was never especially rare, and its value depended almost entirely on the decoration. The more distinctive the design, the greater the interest from collectors. That's why the appraiser carefully examined every decorative detail instead of focusing only on the porcelain itself.
The dogs and cats are really elevating the value, but let's turn it around and see what else is on it. You've got, on both pieces, an automobile. Now,
then, one small detail completely changed the direction of the appraisal. Throughout the history of decorative arts, images capturing new inventions have always fascinated collectors because they preserve the exact moment when the world was entering a new era.
And you see very little images of automobiles at this period. I would date this to about 1905. That automobile image kind of trumps everything in terms of value.
That is what makes this porcelain set so remarkable. It isn't the craftsmanship or the material that sets it apart, but a decoration that captures one of the earliest chapters in the history of the automobile. That single feature lifts these pieces beyond ordinary children's porcelain and into a far more interesting collecting category.
I would say because they are of this period, with the automobile, the pair of them in a good antique shop would certainly sell for about $150 or perhaps as much as $200.
Okay.
The final valuation came to just $150 to $200, but number 23 highlights one of the most fascinating principles in the antiques world. Sometimes the smallest detail is the one that defines an object's entire value.
It belonged to an aunt of mine, and when she moved house, she asked my husband if he'd like it.
So your husband liked it. Do you like it?
Not particularly, no.
What's the one word that would sum it up, do you think?
Ugly.
Number 22, Martin Brothers Grotesque Vase. Not everyone appreciates a Martin Brothers piece the first time they see one. Distorted faces, strange human-like creatures, and exaggerated expressions make these works look more like characters from an old fantasy tale than traditional decorative pottery. Yet those very qualities have made Martin Brothers one of the most sought-after names in British art pottery, attracting collectors who value originality far more than conventional beauty.
Well, the one word for me is grotesque. Do you know where the word comes from?
No.
It means grottos.
The term grotesque dates back to the Renaissance and describes imaginative, unconventional figures inspired by the rediscovery of ancient Roman art. By the late 19th century, the Martin brothers had transformed that centuries-old artistic tradition into pottery, producing works that challenged expectations and encouraged viewers to look beyond appearance.
And here we see it in the late Victorian version. We've got a date here for 1890. The thing I like about the Martin brothers is that they had a sense of humor.
That sense of humor, combined with bold creativity and a willingness to ignore artistic conventions, became the signature of the Martin brothers. Like many antiques that have survived for well over a century, however, this vase isn't in perfect condition, and its condition would ultimately play an important role in determining its value.
Sadly, it does have this hairline fracture in it, in the bottom, so that does detract from the value in quite a big way. If you were to sell it, it would probably go to a Martin Brothers collector. They would pay somewhere, I think, between £400 and £700 for it.
Very good.
The final valuation came in at £400 to £700. Not an extraordinary figure compared with the remarkable treasures still ahead in today's countdown, but number 22 is a reminder that great art isn't always measured by traditional beauty. Sometimes it's originality, personality, and the courage to be different that make a piece truly collectible. And after a vase that celebrates the wonderfully strange world of British grotesque pottery, we're heading in the opposite direction to a miniature masterpiece where an entire world is painted onto a surface so small that every brushstroke leaves the experts in awe. Number 21, 19th century Japanese miniature vase. If number 22 impressed us with its bizarre forms and unmistakable personality, number 21 does exactly the opposite. This vase doesn't stand out because of its size or its glaze. What makes it truly remarkable is an extraordinary level of craftsmanship, where every tiny space on its surface has been used to tell a story.
I think many years ago by a patient. He was a GP in Lincolnshire, and I think he was given this just as a gift one time.
By the late 19th century, Japanese decorative arts had entered an era where miniature craftsmanship reached an extraordinary level. Artists weren't simply making objects smaller, they were fitting more detail into less space, pushing the limits of precision, and transforming even the smallest pieces into remarkable works of art.
When you're looking at it, even at this distance, what you see is a blue vase with a couple of panels. I'm lucky, of course, being myopic, and I'm going to look really closely. To be able to paint like that, using one hair of a brush, and probably going blind in the process, is breathtaking.
From a distance, it appears to be nothing more than a small blue vase with a few decorative panels. But the closer you look, the more each panel unfolds into a complete scene, filled with astonishing depth, color, and detail, so intricate that it's difficult to imagine they were painted entirely by hand. It's the kind of artistry that rivals works many times its size.
This is miniaturism gone completely mad.
I hadn't realised all that detail was on it.
Well, there you are. I mean, this is a universe on a small piece of pottery.
It's no surprise that the appraiser described it as a universe on a small piece of pottery. That wasn't simply a compliment for its beauty, it was recognition of the extraordinary patience, precision, and artistic skill required to create something so incredibly detailed.
This is, in fact, from the workshop. It's an impressed mark. It says Kinkozan. I think it would probably fetch somewhere between £1,200 and £1,800.
All right, goodness.
The final valuation of £1,200 to £1,800 proves that size has never determined the true value of a work of art. Do you agree with the appraiser's valuation? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.
So I bought this at Goodwill last summer, and it was kind of a whim purchase, and I love the colors, I love the style.
So what did you pay for it?
I believe it was $15-ish.
Number 20, Roseville Pottery POULEO Vase. $15 is the kind of price that rarely raises expectations. But the moment the vase was placed on the appraisal table, the expert immediately thought he knew exactly what he was looking at. Based on the glaze, the colors, and the overall design, every clue seemed to point toward one obvious conclusion.
You plopped it out on the table, and I went, I know what that is. That's Italian, 1950s. Look at the glaze, look at the colors. And we turned it over, and on the bottom, there are no marks. And I'm like, oops, that's not Italian. That's not Italian at all.
One quick look at the bottom completely changed that first impression. That's what makes the appraisal process so fascinating. A single overlooked detail can rewrite the entire story, and in this case, it led the expert to one of America's most celebrated art pottery manufacturers instead.
It's American.
Okay.
And it's early 20th century. Actually, it was made in Ohio.
Oh.
It's made by Roseville Pottery. This line is called POULEO. They didn't make a lot of it. One thing I really like about it are the handles.
The PAULEO line was produced in relatively limited numbers, and examples surviving in such excellent condition more than a century later are increasingly difficult to find. That combination of rarity, distinctive design, and remarkable preservation places this vase well beyond the category of an ordinary decorative object.
We believe that the retail price for this vase would probably fall somewhere between $1,500 and $2,000.
Wow. Wow.
Purchased for about $15, this vase was ultimately valued at $1,500 to $2,000. It may not be the biggest windfall in today's countdown, but it's certainly one of the most satisfying discoveries. It also reminds us that remarkable finds aren't always hidden inside elite collections or auction rooms. Sometimes they're simply waiting to be noticed on a shelf at Goodwill. Number 19, 305 years old punch pot. After discoveries from Goodwill and remarkable art pottery, number 19 takes us back more than 3 centuries to early 18th century England. At first glance, it appears to be an unusual antique pot, but from the very beginning, its craftsmanship immediately caught the appraiser's attention. More intriguingly, even the family wasn't entirely sure what the piece had originally been made for.
A great pot and beautifully produced, lovely crabstock handle. I've always been led to believe that it was a pot for hot chocolate.
While examining the piece, the appraiser quickly noticed 2 small letters, GR. It was a tiny detail, but one that completely changed the direction of the appraisal. Rather than focusing solely on its form or craftsmanship, he began investigating the meaning of those initials and their connection to British royal history.
Well, it's got GR on the sides, George Rex. This is probably the coronation of George II in the 1720s.
Once those initials were considered alongside the decorative style and manufacturing techniques, the picture became much clearer. What first appeared to be an ordinary antique vessel was now linked to an important royal event, placing its origins in the early decades of the 18th century.
I don't think it's a teapot. I think it's more likely to be a punch pot. I think this is undoubtedly George II.
That discovery also changed the understanding of the object itself. Rather than simply serving as a vessel for hot drinks, it was more likely created as a commemorative piece. The fact that it has survived for over 300 years while retaining most of its original form makes it an impressive survivor from its period.
The condition is very good. It's going to be over the £1,000 bracket. I think it's probably something like between £1,500 and £2,000. I love it as a super piece.
The final valuation of £1,500 to £2,000 reflects far more than the object's age. It recognizes both its historical significance and the outstanding quality of its craftsmanship. Number 19 reminds us that sometimes a single small mark is enough to unlock a story spanning more than 300 years, transforming what appears to be an ordinary antique into a remarkable witness to British history. Number 18, CARLTON Ware Vase. Sometimes a collector knows within seconds that an object is simply too special to walk away from. That's exactly what happened when the owner first spotted this CARLTON Ware vase in an antique center in London. There was only one problem. He couldn't afford it. And the solution he came up with became one of the most unusual stories ever told on Antiques Roadshow.
I bought it in one of these antique centres in London about a year ago.
Yeah.
It was a case of love at first sight. I couldn't quite afford it at the time.
Oh, that was a problem. You wanted it, but you couldn't afford it. How did you resolve that?
Well, I bought one half of it.
You bought a half?
It sounds almost unbelievable, but it was true. The buyer and seller agreed to split ownership of the vase, hoping that one day it could be reunited. As the appraiser examined it more closely, however, it quickly became clear why someone would go to such extraordinary lengths to own it.
I think it's the finest CARLTON Ware vase that I've seen. To the handwork on the bird here, with each separate feather colour applied by hand, we can see that it's a magnificent piece of work.
Carlton ware was already famous for its vibrant glazes and richly decorated ceramics, but this vase stood well above the ordinary. Every detail had been finished by hand with remarkable precision, creating a design full of depth, movement, and craftsmanship that set it apart even among the company's finest productions.
And the shape, after a Chinese shape, is absolutely gorgeous. Down the inside of the vase, we have these lustres, which Carlton ware were famous for.
Yeah.
This vase was made about 1928.
Yes.
It's a rare pattern. It's very unusual in size.
From its Chinese-inspired form to the signature luster finish inside the vase, every element reflected the quality that made Carlton ware so highly respected. Its rare pattern, unusual size, and exceptional level of workmanship combined to make it one of the most impressive examples of early 20th century British art pottery.
Carlton ware is just becoming more and more collectible at the moment. People are really beginning to appreciate the quality of the work. I think if you put this into an auction at the moment, you would get £3,000 for it.
The final valuation of £3,000 turned the decision to buy only half of the vase into a surprisingly rewarding investment. Number 17. Pair of Qianlong Chinese export vases. After the story of a collector who was willing to buy only half a vase, number 17 begins in a much quieter and more personal way. These two vases weren't discovered in an antique shop or purchased at a prestigious auction.
Tell me, what do you know about these?
I know very little about them. They were left to me by my late brother, and all I do know is that he thought they were from the Dutch East India Company.
Family stories often fade with time, leaving only fragments behind. As memories disappear, the objects themselves become the only reliable clues. Every decorative detail, every proportion, and every manufacturing technique can help reconstruct a history that has been forgotten for generations. After examining the pair more closely, the appraiser quickly realized that the family's long-held assumption wasn't quite right.
They are Chinese.
Okay.
They're Chinese. And they are based on English silver originals of about 1720, right? But actually, these date from about 1760. So they were copying something which was out of date.
During the 18th century, Chinese export porcelain reached extraordinary levels of craftsmanship as workshops produced ceramics specifically for European buyers. Many forms were inspired by fashionable Western silverware, but they were recreated using traditional Chinese porcelain techniques. The result was a unique combination of Eastern craftsmanship and European taste, reflecting the global trade that connected continents long before the modern world.
They're quite rare survivals.
Really?
This would have been done specially to European taste. I think this is Compagnie des Indes, made for the French market.
Okay.
Beautifully decorated, hand-painted in famille rose enamels.
These vases stand out not only because they survived for more than 2 centuries, but also because of the exceptional quality of their decoration. The delicate famille rose enamels were applied entirely by hand, while the overall design reflects the refined tastes of European collectors during the Qianlong period. Pieces of this quality were never ordinary household objects. They were luxury exports created for a demanding international market.
Possibly.
£2,000?
No.
3,000?
No.
Okay, that's as high as I can get.
Yeah.
Well, maybe 3.5.
No, I think I would rather, because of the memory of my brother.
The final valuation settled at around £3,500. It's certainly an impressive figure, but for the owner, the greatest value was never measured in pounds. These vases remain a lasting reminder of the brother who passed them down, making their sentimental importance impossible to replace. Number 16. Exquisite Bohemian Glass Vase. After a series of remarkable ceramic treasures, number 16 introduces a masterpiece whose greatest beauty comes from something far less tangible, light itself. This vase wasn't discovered at an auction or during an antique hunting adventure. Instead, it quietly remained in one family for years, becoming part of childhood memories long before anyone realized its true significance.
It was given to me by my grandmother. She knew that I liked it, and I had been fascinated by the way it captured light. Shortly before she died in 1990, she did pass it on to me.
The family story was touching. But it was the vase itself that immediately caught the appraiser's attention. After only a brief examination, he recognized that this wasn't Venetian glass, as many people might assume. Instead, it came from Bohemia, a region celebrated across Europe for producing some of the finest glassmakers of the 19th century.
It is, in fact, as you probably know, Bohemian. It's based on a medieval shape. The glass itself is cut, blown first of all, and cut to the shape in two pieces. And then the yellow colour is added externally.
What makes this vase exceptional isn't simply its elegant form or vibrant color. It began as clear blown glass before a layer of rich yellow glass was carefully applied to the exterior. Only then did the craftsman begin the painstaking process of cutting away that outer layer by hand, creating the dramatic contrasts and visual depth that became a hallmark of 19th century Bohemian glass.
But of course, what is really remarkable is just see the depth of cuttings is where the glass has been coloured all yellow, and then it is cut off to a precision. It's a remarkable piece.
The remarkable depth of the cutting is what truly sets this vase apart. As light passes through the different layers of glass, the carved surfaces constantly shift in appearance, producing an effect that changes from every angle. It is this combination of artistic vision and extraordinary craftsmanship that has made Bohemian cut glass so highly respected among collectors for generations.
So there it is, made in Bohemia, hand-cut by one man around about 1860 to 1870. And I suppose today at auction, I would think that you would expect to pay at least £4,000 for it.
With a final valuation of at least £4,000, a treasured family gift became a highly desirable work of 19th century decorative art. Number 16 is a reminder that an object's greatest value isn't always revealed the moment it enters a family's home. Sometimes it takes generations before the world fully recognizes the remarkable craftsmanship that has been quietly admired all along. Number 15, Chinese Canton Punch Bowl. For many antique collectors, the biggest concern isn't how much an object is worth. It's whether it's genuine. That was exactly why the owner brought this Chinese Canton Punch Bowl to Antiques Roadshow. Before hearing anything about its value, he wanted the answer to one simple question. Was it the real thing?
You're afraid it's a fake?
Yes, I'm afraid it's a fake.
Why do you think it might be a fake?
Everybody who goes to this show is afraid that...
It was a perfectly understandable concern. Chinese Canton porcelain has been copied extensively over the years, and reproductions of varying quality continue to circulate in today's market. With so many imitations available, even experienced owners can begin to question what they have. This time, however, the appraiser needed only a few moments before reaching a confident conclusion.
Let me put your mind at rest, because it certainly isn't a fake. They are quite clearly done by hand.
With that single sentence, the entire atmosphere changed. From that moment on, the appraisal was no longer about proving authenticity. Instead, it became an exploration of the bowl's history. The hand-painted outlines and traditional decorative techniques immediately confirmed that this was an authentic example, allowing the appraiser to focus on where it came from and when it was made.
It is actually a punch bowl. The landscapes on the inside are continuous landscapes, and on the outside there is another continuous landscape. So that's what I'm going to use to date this piece to somewhere around the middle of the 19th century.
Unlike many later Canton wares produced in large quantities, this punch bowl features continuous landscape scenes flowing around both the interior and exterior. That style of decoration reflects an earlier period of production, when export porcelain was still crafted with exceptional attention to detail for international buyers.
The most important factor is the condition. I can't see any restoration. I'm going to just whack it.
Once the date had been established, condition became the most important factor. For antique porcelain, surviving more than a century and a half without significant restoration or structural damage is a major advantage, and it provided the foundation for the final appraisal.
Well, I'm going to give you a valuation, a British valuation on this, somewhere between £3,000 and £5,000.
Woo. Good morning.
The final valuation came in at £3,000 to £5,000, an impressive result for a bowl whose owner had feared it might be nothing more than a reproduction. Number 14. Incredible Victorian art pottery. Not every elaborately decorated vase turns out to be a hidden treasure. But sometimes, a single factory mark is enough to take an appraiser back to the golden age of British art pottery. This vase had remained in the same family for many years, arriving at Antiques Roadshow with very little known about its original history. Like so many family heirlooms, it had been carefully preserved, even though no one knew exactly how important it might be.
I've had it for about 20 years. It belonged to an aunt of mine. She had it, I don't know for how long, I suppose again about 20 years. It was given to her by a friend and admirer.
The moment the appraiser examined the mark on the base, he immediately recognized it as a piece of Bermentoff's faience, the celebrated art pottery produced by the Leeds Fire Clay Company during the late 19th century. Although the company originally specialized in architectural ceramics and decorative building materials, it soon became one of the leading names of the Victorian art pottery movement, producing bold, colorful works that attracted collectors throughout Britain. This vase captures that remarkable period perfectly. Its graceful proportions, richly colored glazes, and Anglo-Persian-inspired decoration all reflect the ambition and creativity that made Bermentoff's one of the most distinctive pottery workshops of the Victorian era.
But the sad thing is, we don't know who it belongs to. The mark was clearly someone very skilled who understood high Victorian taste of the time, but we don't know their name at all.
Perhaps the most intriguing part of the story is that while historians can confidently identify the factory, the artist who actually painted this vase remains completely unknown. Even so, the exceptional quality of the brushwork, the sophisticated use of color, and the carefully balanced decorative design continue to make Bermentoff's highly desirable among collectors of Victorian art pottery more than a century later.
But even a good old Bermentoff piece is certainly going to be, I would think, £4,000 or £5,000.
The final valuation came in at £4,000 to £5,000. It may not be the highest appraisal in today's countdown, but number 14 is a reminder that great works of art don't always owe their importance to a famous signature. Sometimes the most remarkable masterpieces are created by gifted craftsmen whose names have faded from history, while the beauty and craftsmanship of their work continue to captivate collectors generation after generation. Number 13, pair of Limoges figural vases. Not every valuable antique is purchased after months of careful research. Sometimes, everything begins with a single moment when an object is simply too beautiful to ignore. That's exactly how the owner came home with this remarkable pair of French porcelain vases. She wasn't searching for a rare collectible or an investment. She was simply looking for two decorative pieces for her fireplace, and these immediately caught her attention.
I was looking for two large pieces for my fireplace mantle. I walked in a home of some antique dealers, and these just took my breath away. I bought them for their visual appeal. I looked for marks and I couldn't find anything.
So often you get one, and that's not the case here, that two of them have survived.
For the appraiser, however, none of that was a problem. The porcelain body, the quality of the glaze, and the sculptural modeling immediately pointed to Limoges porcelain, one of France's finest ceramic traditions during the second half of the 19th century. Every sculpted figure, every decorative detail, and the elegant combination of glossy glazed surfaces with delicate biscuit porcelain demonstrated the remarkable skill of the artists who created them.
And the condition is just amazing for this size and the potential for these, with all of the different feet and hands coming out, that something could have happened to them.
What impressed the appraiser even more than the artistry was the condition. With so many projecting hands, feet, flowers, and delicate sculptural elements, accidental damage would have been almost unavoidable over more than a century. Yet both vases had survived together. For collectors, finding a complete matching pair is far more unusual than finding a single example, making sets like this considerably more desirable whenever they appear on the market.
And what did you pay for the pair?
I paid $1,500 for the pair.
In today's market, in a well-established auction house, I would expect them to sell in the range of $4,000 to $6,000.
That is nice.
What began as a purchase based entirely on visual appeal ended with a valuation of $4,000 to $6,000. Number 13 is a reminder that instinct can sometimes become a collector's greatest advantage. Not every remarkable discovery begins with expert knowledge, careful research, or years of experience. Sometimes simply recognizing exceptional beauty is enough to lead to a truly memorable find. Number 12. Japanese embellished Chinese snuff bottle. At first glance, this appears to be nothing more than a small jade snuff bottle, the kind of object often found in collections of Asian decorative arts. But after only a few moments of examination, the appraiser realized this piece was remarkable for a very different reason.
This is a snuff bottle that was passed down from my great-aunt Selita, and she and her husband traveled extensively, probably in the 1920s. They went overseas and they were in the Orient a fair amount.
The family knew only that the bottle had been brought home after the owner's great-aunt traveled extensively throughout Asia many decades ago. Looking more closely, however, the appraiser quickly identified it as a Tang Dynasty snuff bottle. Objects like these were once prized by members of the Chinese elite, serving not only as practical accessories but also as miniature works of art, where master craftsmen demonstrated the highest levels of jade carving and decorative skill.
What's interesting about this snuff bottle in particular is the bottle itself. We can separate it into two components.
The real surprise is that this bottle was not completed during a single period of history. Its white nephrite jade body was carved in 18th century China, while the elaborate decoration was added in Japan roughly a century later. Delicate blossoms, precious stones, and refined lacquer work transformed an already exceptional object into something entirely unique, blending two artistic traditions into one remarkable masterpiece. It's a combination that collectors rarely encounter, and one that gives this snuff bottle a character unlike almost any other.
It's a very fine bottle made even finer during the 19th century, and this is why I think it's so special.
Normally, altering an antique reduces its value. In this case, the opposite happened. Rather than replacing the original craftsmanship, the Japanese artist enhanced it with another layer of extraordinary workmanship. The result is an object that celebrates both Chinese jade carving and Japanese decorative artistry, making it far more desirable than a typical Qing snuff bottle.
Well, the snuff bottle market is a strong one presently. I think if this were to come up for auction in 2016, a conservative and reasonable auction estimate would be $4,000 to $6,000.
You're kidding. Oh my gosh. I had no idea.
That's an impressive figure for an object small enough to fit in the palm of your hand. But number 12 is memorable for more than its price. Number 11, piece of Worcester porcelain. Not every treasure is discovered in a prestigious auction house. Sometimes it is simply sitting in a tray of miscellaneous odds and ends, waiting for someone to recognize its true significance. That is exactly how this tiny piece began its journey to Antiques Roadshow.
Wasn't it? We had a tray of different odds and ends, little things, glassware and sort of things, and this was amongst them.
Was it?
And just purchased for a couple of pounds.
For just a couple of pounds, almost no one would have expected this little sauce boat to be anything special. Yet the moment the appraiser picked it up, he immediately realized he was looking at something remarkably rare. Although its decoration resembles mid-18th century Chinese export porcelain, it's actually an early example of Worcester porcelain, one of England's first porcelain factories. It was made during a period when English potters were still experimenting with techniques and decorative styles inspired by the Far East while developing an identity of their own. Pieces from this pioneering era survived in only very limited numbers, making them highly desirable among collectors of early English ceramics.
It is actually amongst the most important pieces of early English porcelain we've ever had on a roadshow.
That is not the kind of statement heard very often on Antiques Roadshow. What makes this piece exceptional is not flawless condition, but its historical importance. It still bears evidence of its long journey through time, including imperfections dating back to the original firing process and minor wear accumulated over centuries. For collectors of early Worcester, however, those details matter far less than rarity and provenance. Surviving examples from the factory's earliest years are extraordinarily scarce, and every new discovery helps tell the story of how England's porcelain industry first emerged.
I mean, it really is. It's a very rare little object. I would give a wide estimate on this, somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000.
No.
The tiny object once overlooked in a bargain tray was ultimately valued at between £5,000 and £10,000. Number 11 is a perfect reminder that in the world of antiques, size rarely determines importance. Sometimes the smallest objects preserve the biggest chapters of history, and pieces measured in just a few inches can become some of the most sought-after treasures in the entire collecting world. Number 10. Extremely rare Imperial Chinese porcelain pot. As we enter the top 10, we begin to see objects whose value can be transformed by a single tiny detail. This porcelain pot had been treasured by the family for more than 30 years after it was given to the owner by a relative who later moved to Canada. Throughout all those years, no one imagined it might have any connection to the imperial court of the Tang Dynasty.
I first met the pot about 35 years ago in Reading, in the house in Reading. The lady that I got it from was a relation of my husband's.
Right.
And when she moved to Canada later on, she gave the pot to me.
From the very first glance, the appraiser knew this was no ordinary piece of Chinese pottery. Its elegant, archaic form and rich cobalt blue decoration immediately suggested a high-quality porcelain made in the classical Chinese tradition. The lotus blossoms, carp, and Buddhist date treasures decorating the surface further pointed to an object of exceptional craftsmanship. Even so, those details were not what excited him the most. The real surprise appeared only after he carefully turned the pot over. A single mark on the base completely changed the direction of the appraisal and revealed that this was something far more significant than anyone in the room had expected.
What is so incredibly rare about this is that this piece is a piece of Imperial Chinese porcelain, is that it has the rain mark and the seal mark of the emperor.
That small rain mark identified the piece as Imperial Chinese porcelain produced for the imperial court during the reign of the Qianlong emperor, one of the greatest periods in the history of Chinese ceramics. Porcelain bearing authentic imperial marks from this era remains among the most sought-after categories in the international collecting market. There was, however, one unfortunate issue. The vessel had been professionally repaired after an old break, and in the world of imperial porcelain, condition plays an enormous role in determining value. Even a well-executed restoration can significantly reduce what collectors are willing to pay.
In perfect state, this is worth many tens of thousands of pounds, somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000.
Had it survived in perfect condition, this imperial pot could have been worth many tens of thousands of pounds. Even with its old restoration, however, it was still valued at between £5,000 and £10,000, thanks to its imperial provenance and exceptional rarity. Number 10 is a perfect reminder that, in the world of Chinese porcelain, a tiny rain mark hidden beneath the base can be worth far more than appearance alone, serving as the key that unlocks nearly 3 centuries of imperial history. Number 9. Turquoise glazed Buddhistic lions. As we move into number 9, we come to a pair of sculptures that quietly remained with one family for well over a century. At first glance, many people would simply see decorative lion figures. In Chinese culture, however, they represent something far more meaningful, symbols of protection, strength, and prosperity that have traditionally stood guard at temples, palaces, and grand residences.
My wife's grandmother's cousin and her husband traveled the world in the early 1900s. They would ship back all the items that they had accumulated while in that country.
Over the generations, most of that remarkable collection disappeared, but this pair survived intact. The moment the appraiser saw them, he immediately recognized them as a pair of Buddhistic lions, guardian figures traditionally created as a male and female set. For centuries, sculptures like these have been placed at entrances to protect the buildings behind them, making them some of the most recognizable symbols in traditional Chinese decorative art. Their impressive size, bold modeling, and remarkably well-preserved condition already suggested that these were far more than ordinary decorative objects.
These are what are called Buddhistic lions, and these were created in sets, a male and female.
Right.
So the male is on your side with the ball.
Right.
The mother has the little baby.
The next feature that caught the appraiser's attention was the brilliant turquoise glaze covering the entire surface. This distinctive color first became popular during the Kangxi period and remains one of the most important clues when dating Chinese ceramics. Combined with the modeling and craftsmanship, it allowed him to place the figures in the late 19th century. Their strong presence, historical symbolism, and the fact that both figures have remained together as a complete pair for more than 100 years make them especially desirable to collectors today.
They're terrific. They're really bold. They're big. They're in good condition. At auction, they would make somewhere between $6,000 and $9,000 today.
Very nice. All right.
In the end, the pair was valued at between $6,000 and $9,000. It is a fitting valuation for objects that combine artistic quality with centuries of Chinese cultural tradition. Number 9 reminds us that in the world of antiques, preserving a complete pair over generations can be just as valuable as age itself, making these guardian lions every bit as remarkable today as when they first stood watch more than a century ago. Number 8. Zsolnay and Orion Peacock Vase. At first glance, most people would assume this is a beautiful piece of iridescent glass. In fact, even its owner believed exactly that. But after only a few seconds of examination, the appraiser realized it was something far rarer, and that behind it was an unexpectedly moving story.
It belonged to a gentleman named Jack Sawyer. Well, Katrina hit. A lot of his pieces were lost. When Jack found out that he was terminally ill, he sent this to me.
The vase once belonged to Jack Sawyer, an art collector from New Orleans. After Hurricane Katrina devastated the area, much of his collection was lost forever, but this remarkable piece survived. When Jack learned that he was terminally ill, he chose to send it to a close friend who had always admired it. Long before the appraisal even began, the vase already carried enormous sentimental value. It was more than an artwork. It was a final gift from one collector to another, preserving both a treasured object and the memory of the person who had cared for it for so many years.
It does look like that. It looks like iridescent glass, but it is a piece of pottery.
That revelation became the first surprise of the appraisal. The vase was not glass at all, but a masterpiece of pottery produced by Zsolnay, Hungary's most celebrated ceramics manufacturer, famous for its remarkable eosin glaze, which creates shimmering colors that shift as light moves across the surface. As the examination continued, the appraiser became equally impressed by the elaborate metal framework surrounding the vase. The sculpted peacocks and flowing Art Nouveau ornamentation transformed it from a beautiful ceramic vessel into a highly sophisticated decorative artwork, combining multiple materials and exceptional craftsmanship.
This is a collaboration between a Hungarian Art Nouveau company and a German Art Nouveau company. Orion was located in Nuremberg, Germany.
The greatest surprise came next. While the ceramic body was made by Zsolnay, the elaborate metal mount was created by Orion, a German Art Nouveau company based in Nuremberg. The two firms collaborated for only a brief period, making surviving examples like this exceptionally scarce. That rare partnership has placed these works in a category of their own, attracting strong interest from collectors who appreciate both Art Nouveau design and the history behind these unusual collaborations.
This is a very special thing. On today's market at auction, I would value it between $7,000 and $10,000. One almost identical to this sold at auction within the last 2 years for $12,000.
Well, I love Jack, but I didn't know he loved me that much.
The vase was ultimately valued at between $7,000 and $10,000, while a nearly identical example has previously sold for $12,000 at auction. Yet, what makes number 8 unforgettable is not simply its market value. It is the story of a rare Art Nouveau masterpiece that became one collector's final gift, carrying both extraordinary craftsmanship and the lasting memory of a cherished friendship into the next generation. Number 7. Chinese Altar Garniture. As we enter the top 7, we are no longer looking at a single vase or decorative object. Instead, we have a complete ceremonial set originally created to stand together in a sacred space. What makes this story even more remarkable is that for many years, the owner's family believed these pieces were Japanese.
My parents lived in Tokyo prior to World War II. They came back by train, and the train would stop at several places. And at one of them, there was a monk selling this set.
It all began with a chance encounter shortly after World War II. During a train journey through the Japanese countryside, the owner's parents met a Buddhist monk who offered the pieces for sale. The set eventually made its way back to the United States, where the family always believed it had originated in Japan. But after carefully examining the glaze, decoration, and overall construction of each piece, the appraiser quickly realized that the real story was completely different. Rather than Japanese ceramics, these objects belong to the rich tradition of Chinese religious porcelain.
For the shape that really tells us that these are Chinese, made in China for a major temple.
The set was identified as a Chinese altar garniture, a ceremonial three-piece ensemble designed to stand on the altar of a major Buddhist temple. What makes it especially important is not only that all three pieces have remained together for more than a century, but also the exceptional quality of their craftsmanship. The Buddhist motifs, vibrant enamel decoration, and distinctive decorative style all point towards skilled artisans working in Jingdezhen, China's most celebrated porcelain center. Complete garnitures of this quality are increasingly difficult to find, making intact examples especially desirable among collectors of Chinese ceramics.
So that's going to affect the value a little bit. It's worth about $15,000 to $25,000 at auction.
The complete altar set was ultimately valued at between $15,000 and $25,000. That estimate reflects not only its artistic quality, but also the rarity of finding an entire garniture still preserved together after generations of ownership. Number 7 reminds us that an appraisal can do more than establish market value. Sometimes it completely rewrites an object's history, transforming what one family believed was a Japanese souvenir into an authentic piece of Chinese religious heritage. Number 6. Chinese Gilt Bronze Bodhisattva. As we enter the top 6, we begin to encounter objects whose value extends far beyond age or rarity. Their true significance lies in the beliefs, traditions, and history they have carried across centuries. This gilt bronze bodhisattva had been part of the owner's family for generations, quietly displayed as a treasured heirloom. Yet no one imagined it was a remarkable piece of Buddhist art dating back nearly 400 years.
That was my grandmother's, who traveled to Asia extensively and was prominently displayed in her home.
The family simply knew it had arrived as a gift from a gentleman who had traveled throughout Asia, remaining with them ever since. But the appraiser immediately recognized that this was no ordinary decorative figure. The rich gilding, the graceful facial features, and the remarkably refined casting all pointed to an exceptional Chinese work. Even after centuries, the gilded surface had survived in outstanding condition, reflecting the extraordinary craftsmanship of highly skilled artisans.
Well, this is a Chinese gilt bronze Buddha, and the gilding's in wonderful condition. This is from the 17th century.
Wow.
Circa 1650.
The sculpture was identified as a Chinese gilt bronze bodhisattva dating to around 1650. Depicting Guanyin, the bodhisattva of compassion in Mahayana Buddhism, every carefully modeled arm and ornamental detail carried both artistic mastery and profound spiritual symbolism. During the examination, however, the expert also discovered one important loss. The original double lotus base had disappeared long ago. For sculptures of this caliber, the base often preserves valuable information about origin and commission, making it an essential part of both the object's history and its market value.
If this did have the original double lotus base, it would probably have a value of about $150,000.
Even without its original lotus base, the bodhisattva was still valued at around $40,000. Had the sculpture retained the complete double lotus pedestal, its value could have reached approximately $150,000. That remarkable difference shows how a single missing component can dramatically influence the worth of an important antique. Even so, number 6 remains an exceptionally rare example of Chinese Buddhist art, admired not only for its remarkable craftsmanship, but also for the centuries of history and devotion preserved within a single extraordinary sculpture. Number 5. Louis C. Tiffany Furnaces Incorporated Vase. As we enter the top 5, we arrive at a vase that is rare not only because of its age, but because it was created during the closing chapter of one of America's most celebrated artistic legacies. The family had always known it was a Tiffany vase, yet they never imagined there was an even more remarkable story behind the famous name.
And my birthday was coming up, and my mother said to my grandmother, "How about giving Tiffany," which is my name, "a Tiffany?" And my grandmother said, "Sure, which one do you want?"
The vase was purchased for one wonderfully simple reason. Since the daughter of the family was named Tiffany, her grandmother came up with the playful idea of giving Tiffany a Tiffany. That birthday gift remained in the family for decades before eventually appearing on Antiques Roadshow. The moment the appraiser saw it, he knew he was looking at something far more unusual than a typical Tiffany vase.
It's actually a very unusual vase. In fact, I'm not sure I've seen another one like it.
That is the kind of comment experts rarely make. Although Louis Comfort Tiffany produced thousands of remarkable glass objects, this particular design is almost one of a kind. Its layered glass construction and flowing organic patterns immediately stood out as an exceptional example from Louis C. Tiffany Furnaces Incorporated. When the appraiser examined the base, a tiny mark revealed exactly when the vase had been made.
It was made in 1926. The reason I know that, on the bottom, it is very difficult to see.
The vase was produced in 1926, several years after Louis Comfort Tiffany's death, when Louis C. Tiffany Furnaces Incorporated continued creating works based on the artistic legacy he had established. Because the company operated for only a brief period, pieces bearing this mark have become exceptionally scarce and are highly sought after by collectors. They represent the final chapter of one of the greatest names in American decorative arts.
In a retail venue, I could see this selling for between $30,000 and $50,000.
Oh my God. Oh, I had no idea.
I think it's really lucky that you were named Tiffany.
The final valuation came in at $30,000 to $50,000. What began as a birthday present chosen simply because of a shared name had become one of the most remarkable discoveries in today's countdown. Number 5 reminds us that some of the most memorable Antiques Roadshow stories are not just about extraordinary values, they're also about the simple, heartfelt reasons an object becomes part of a family's history. Number 4. OVERBECK VASE, circa 1920. At number 4, we come to one of the most astonishing Goodwill surprises ever featured on Antiques Roadshow. This wasn't a family heirloom or a forgotten treasure hidden away in an attic. It was simply sitting on a shelf at a Goodwill store with a price tag of just $4.99.
Me and my wife were shopping at a local Goodwill. I saw it sitting on the shelf, and I thought, oh, it's so beautiful. Well, I don't know who it is, but for $4.99.
The owner bought the vase simply because it looked different from everything else on the shelf, never imagining it would become one of the most remarkable discoveries of the day. The moment the appraiser saw it, he immediately recognized it as a piece by OVERBECK Pottery, the celebrated Indiana art pottery studio founded by the 4 Overbeck sisters in the early 20th century. Unlike large commercial manufacturers, OVERBECK produced its ceramics entirely by hand, with every vase individually formed and decorated in very limited numbers. That craftsmanship, combined with the workshop's relatively short production history, has made genuine OVERBECK pieces increasingly scarce and highly desirable among American art pottery collectors.
This piece is marked, as almost all OVERBECK pieces are. This piece is marked OBK for OVERBECK.
That was far more than a casual compliment. Not only was this an authentic OVERBECK vase, it was an exceptionally fine example. Its strong American arts and crafts design, beautifully balanced proportions, richly preserved glaze, and crisp carved decoration all reflected the remarkable skill of its makers. Even after more than a century, the vase retained the qualities collectors hope to find but rarely encounter, making it one of the studio's most impressive surviving works.
At auction, it would bring somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000. This one's got it.
Got my heart thumping.
And you paid how much for this?
$4.99.
From $4.99 to an estimated $50,000 to $100,000, this became one of the most extraordinary increases in value anywhere in today's countdown. Number 4 is the perfect reminder that some of the greatest Antiques Roadshow discoveries are not hidden in prestigious collections or famous auction houses. Sometimes, an extraordinary masterpiece is simply waiting on an ordinary Goodwill shelf for the one person who recognizes that it deserves a second look. Number 3. Chinese Imperial Celadon Charger. As we enter the top 3, we come to an object that spent most of its life in places no one would ever think to look first in an attic, and later underneath a bed. To the family, it was simply a beautiful Celadon charger brought back from Japan many years ago. No one imagined they had been living with a masterpiece created for the Imperial Court of China.
It is a Celadon bowl that was a gift to me from my uncle, who brought it from Japan. This stuff sat in my grandmother's attic for a good many years, and finally he rediscovered it and gave it to me as a Christmas gift to my husband.
The charger remained in the family as a special Christmas gift, and for years that was the end of its story. It was so large that the owner even took a photograph of her cat sitting comfortably inside it. Everyone laughed at the memory, but while the audience enjoyed the story, the appraiser was already focused on something entirely different.
I've actually got a picture of my cat sitting in that bowl at some point or another.
The first is the label on this box.
The first thing he examined was not the charger itself, but the wooden presentation box. That box unlocked the entire mystery. It revealed that this was not a Japanese piece at all, but an Imperial Chinese Celadon charger made during the Yongzheng reign. The elegant jade green glaze, the finely molded dragon decoration, and the exceptional firing quality all reflected the extraordinary standards of the imperial kilns at Jingdezhen, where only the finest porcelains were produced for the Qing court.
At auction today, in 2021, I would put perhaps a conservative auction estimate of $80,000 to $120,000.
And it's under my bed all the time.
The final auction estimate came in at $80,000 to $120,000. Only then did the owner realize that an imperial masterpiece had been sitting underneath her bed for years. Number 3 perfectly captures what makes Antiques Roadshow so fascinating. Sometimes the greatest treasures are not displayed in museums or locked away in famous collections. They are quietly waiting to be rediscovered inside someone's own home. Number 2. Early 15th century Chinese Bodhisattva gilt bronze. Only 2 discoveries remain in our countdown, and number 2 features one of the most extraordinary finds ever seen on Antiques Roadshow. This story didn't begin in a museum or a prestigious private collection. It started at an ordinary garage sale. Had the owner arrived just a few minutes later, someone else might have walked away with this remarkable sculpture, and this incredible appraisal would never have happened.
I almost didn't have a chance to acquire it. There was a local person who was a colorful character in Kirkwood, so I really wanted to get to his garage sale. I just grabbed it.
May I inquire what you paid for it?
Probably between $75 and $100.
For less than $100, the owner simply felt there was something special about the statue. She wasn't an expert in Buddhist sculpture, but something about it stood out. The moment the appraiser picked it up, however, he realized this was no ordinary decorative object. The elegant facial features, flowing robes, exceptional casting, and remarkably preserved gilding all pointed to an artwork of outstanding quality. Every detail reflected the skill of master craftsmen and suggested that this bronze had a far more important history than anyone had imagined.
Is really a characteristic of very early Buddhist art. The dating would be approximately early 15th century or early Ming dynasty.
The sculpture was identified as Wenshu, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and dated to the early 15th century during the Ming Dynasty. Gilt bronze figures from this period that still retain such fine casting and original gilding are exceptionally rare. After studying its style, craftsmanship, and surviving construction details, the appraiser revealed an even more remarkable conclusion about its significance.
It's likely that the quality would indicate that it's an imperial piece.
Appraiser. It's likely that the quality would indicate that it's an imperial piece. Narration. The extraordinary workmanship suggested that this was likely an imperial piece, created either for the imperial court or to meet the exacting standards reserved for the highest levels of Ming society. That assessment alone elevated the sculpture into the ranks of the finest Chinese Buddhist works ever examined on the program.
A very conservative retail price would be $100,000 to $125,000.
The final valuation came in at $100,000 to $125,000. A sculpture purchased at a garage sale for less than $100 had become one of the most spectacular value increases in this entire countdown. Number 2 proves that in the world of antiques, one quick decision can sometimes lead to the discovery of a masterpiece that has survived for more than 600 years. Number 1. Tang Dynasty Marble Lion. And finally, we've reached number 1. After a countdown filled with imperial treasures, rare porcelains, and astonishing appraisals, this remarkable sculpture still stands above them all. To the family, it was simply a stone lion their grandparents had brought back from China many decades ago. But the moment the appraiser saw it, he knew he was looking at a masterpiece that rarely appears anywhere outside the world's leading museums.
My grandparents picked it up. They traveled a lot in China. My mother's had it in her house, and then I inherited it and brought it west.
The sculpture had remained with the family for generations, and no one realized just how important it truly was. Within moments of examining it, the appraiser was captivated by the quality of its carving. The powerful musculature, flowing mane, and centuries of natural wear across the marble all reflected extraordinary craftsmanship. To him, this was far more than a decorative stone sculpture. It was an exceptional example of early Chinese art, created by a master sculptor.
This is among the finest examples of Chinese art that we have seen on the roadshow.
That is a statement rarely heard on Antiques Roadshow. Even more surprising, the lion was not from the Ming Dynasty, as the family had always believed. After studying its sculptural style, proportions, and the marble itself, the appraiser reached an even more remarkable conclusion.
It's not Ming Dynasty. This dates from the golden period of Chinese art, which is called the Tang Dynasty.
The sculpture was identified as dating to the Tang Dynasty, the golden age of Chinese art and culture. Marble guardian lions of this quality have become exceptionally rare after more than 1,000 years, making surviving examples highly sought after by major museums and serious collectors around the world. Its age, remarkable craftsmanship, and historical significance place it among the finest Chinese works ever featured on the program.
I would say that an insurance figure on this would be somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000, probably toward the high end. I would say around $250,000.
Wow.
With an auction estimate of $120,000 to $180,000 and an insurance value of approximately $250,000, the marble lion became the highest valued discovery in today's entire countdown. Yet what truly earned it the #1 position wasn't simply its price, it was the extraordinary quality of a sculpture worthy of standing beside masterpieces displayed in the world's greatest museums.
I'm just really pleased.
So it's worth lugging it in here.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
And that is the perfect ending to today's countdown. From forgotten thrift store finds to imperial treasures once made for palaces and temples, every object has carried an extraordinary story waiting to be uncovered.